Hi, everybody. So I'm just going to wait a couple of minutes before I get started just to see if anyone will be joining us. And then I'll talk a little bit about yesterday. The trial against Juan Orlando Hernandez is now over. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about what happened yesterday, sort of what was Juan Orlando Hernandez's reaction, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about what's to come of the putting the U.S. and Canada on trial campaign. So I'll just wait a couple more minutes and then I'll get started. So I hope people can hear me. So behind me is another view of the Southern District Court, I believe. There's a whole bunch of courts around this area. So behind me is one of the courts, another entrance of the court. So today, is Saturday, and yesterday, Friday the 8th, March 8th, was the last day of the trial against the former president of Honduras, Juan Orlando Hernandez. Juan Orlando Hernandez has been accused of drug trafficking and like a conspiracy to traffic cocaine, as well as a conspiracy to use weapons and destructive devices, so machine guns, to traffic cocaine, as well as the use of weapons and destructive devices. And yesterday, the jury was handed the case on Thursday at around 11:45, and they were deliberating since Thursday. And then yesterday at exactly 1:30, we were all sort of waiting in the court, the people who had made the line early in the morning, to basically go into the court and just wait for the deliberation of the jury. And so at around 1:30, the marshals, which are sort of the security of the court, came in, and sort of some of them went to the very back of the courtroom to stand in the back, and then two of them sat right behind in the first row behind Juan Orlando Hernandez and behind his other marshals that were there the whole time. So there was 4 marshals behind him, and basically the judge came in and said that the jury had reached a verdict. So we all stood for the jury as they came into the courtroom, and the judge started by saying, telling everyone in the audience that he expected there to be no reaction from anyone in the audience. And regardless of what the verdict was, that nobody could say anything or react, and to be respectful of the court. And then the judge basically said, jury, have you reached a decision? And the jury elected a foreperson to speak on behalf of the jury. And so the man that was appointed, the foreperson, got up and said yes, that they had reached a verdict. And the court secretary got a microphone that wasn't really working, so it was a little bit hard to hear. But said, on how do you find the accused, the defendant, on count 1, which is the conspiracy to traffic drugs, and the jury foreperson said guilty. And then they went through the different sort of requirements under each charge. So, was the accused responsible for trafficking cocaine? Yes. Was it over 5 kilograms of cocaine? Yes. And then the court secretary did the same on count 2 and on count 3. There was no reaction from people in the court, as per the judge's instructions, except that, it was of surprise to some, and to others it wasn't, the verdict. But as Juan Orlando Hernandez heard the jury saying that he was guilty, he sort of bowed his head and just sort of looked down and didn't really react. I couldn't see him from where I was sitting. I was sitting directly behind him, so I couldn't see his facial reactions, but I did see that he bowed his head. And two of his family members, I think they're the sisters of Ana Garcia, his spouse, were sitting in the second row behind the two extra marshals that they'd sent in just for the verdict. And one of them started crying. I could see her, you know, her eyes were watering, and she was obviously very upset. And so, I mean, that was basically, you know, the verdict, guilty. And then, you know, before the jury determined the verdict and sort of announced the verdict, they had sent questions to the parties in the trial asking about the case as they were deliberating. And the final one that they asked about, for me, was a very big indication that they were going down the road of finding him guilty. And so once I heard that the jury was asking about that evidence, which was basically electronic data that the prosecution had presented and extracted from an iCloud account of a co-conspirator that basically identified Juan Orlando Hernandez as being CC4 or co-conspirator 4, I sort of knew that that was what the verdict was going to be, or that it was sort of a sign, or could have been a sign, that the verdict was going to be guilty. So afterwards, you know, we all left the courtroom, and some of the Hondurans that were in the audience sort of were just like, so that's it? You know, it kind of seemed a little bit anticlimactic because it was hard to hear the jury, and it was hard to hear the secretary as they were announcing the verdict. After, you know, more than 2 weeks in trial, it was sort of like, you know, it's over. And so we all filed out of the courtroom. And then outside in front of the court on the other side of the street, where Hondurans had been set up for, you know, a couple of weeks, on some days more than others, there was people that gathered. Hondurans had come from all over different parts of the U.S. I think there was even some people that flew in from Texas, people that came from Maryland. There was even Hondurans that came in from Honduras that were able to afford it to be here for the verdict and to make the line early in the morning to get into the court to hear the verdict. And so outside there was a bunch of, and I did a live stream, I think on Wednesday or Thursday, I think it was Thursday, the day before the verdict, of the vigil that Hondurans had set up with all these pictures, and I'll post videos, and I actually posted a video on the Honduras Now Twitter, of all these pictures of people that had been killed in the 12 years since the coup, both people that were killed in the context of the coup, and then also people that were killed, you know, in different protests, in the struggles, in land struggles. Berta Cáceres, a picture of Berta Cáceres was there, a picture of Angel Flores from MUCA, the Unified Movement, Campesino Movement of the Iguan, was there, and then Isis Obed Morillo, who was killed in the context of the coup. So there was a vigil with candles, Honduran flags, there was banners and posters calling for the extradition of more individuals that are involved in the narco state in Honduras. And so there was a lot of celebration. Hondurans sang the national anthem, did some cheers, some protest cheers. And then people that didn't gather in that area, mostly the press that have been very supportive of Juan Orlando Hernandez over many years, didn't come to that area and were sort of stayed far away. And I think there was some people that even cried because they were upset that Juan Orlando Hernandez had been found guilty. So, I mean, it was a very big moment, a historical moment for sure. And it was really nice to be there, to be with all of the Hondurans that had come to celebrate that, you know, the historical conviction of Juan Orlando Hernandez on drug trafficking. But there was a lot of discussions about all the work that still needs to be done in Honduras because of the damages that, you know, that the narco state has left behind, and the narco-dictatorship. I mean, it's not easy to overturn 12 years of a dictatorship in Honduras, especially when the institutions of the state were co-opted into the narco state, were involved in the narco state, were involved in drug trafficking, and are still very much entrenched in that narco state. And so there was a lot of discussion about reflection. There was a lot of discussion about what still needs to be done, that there's a lot more to be done. And so it was nice to be around, you know, a hopeful and celebratory environment, but also an environment that understood that there was so much more work to do, and that, you know, the narco state is very much still intact in Honduras. So After the verdict in Honduras, the National Party, which is Juan Orlando Hernandez's party, and many National Party members were mentioned or have been mentioned in the Southern District Court for being involved or in some way associated with the narco state. They put out a communique, which we will post on our social media accounts at Honduras Sol or Honduras Now, and also Ana Garcia, the spouse of Juan Orlando Hernandez, basically did a communique in Honduras claiming that Juan Orlando Hernandez is innocent. And then actually I forgot to mention that when Juan Orlando Hernandez got up in the courtroom to leave, as he was escorted by marshals out of the courtroom, he said very quietly to his spouses or his sister-in-laws that were in the second row, he said, "Take care of them for me. I'm innocent, tell the world." That's what he said in Spanish. So again, Ana Garcia, his spouse, did a press conference saying that it was a very difficult verdict for them as a family, but that also that Juan Orlando Hernandez is innocent. And so this is the discourse in Honduras that, this is unfair. This is, Juan Orlando Hernandez is innocent. And at the Honduras Solidarity Network, we know that this is not true. We know that how much Juan Orlando Hernandez, the damage that he's done. I sat in the whole entire trial. I saw all the evidence. I think the prosecutors did a good job. But then again, at the same time, we also know that this was very much as we want Juan Orlando Hernandez guilty on drug trafficking, he's being accused of crimes, the least of his crimes, because of all the people that he murdered, all the land offenders that he murdered, the women, LGBT community, journalists, lawyers that were murdered under his dictatorship. We know that he has not been held accountable for that. We also know that the United States and Canada very much supported him and have not been held accountable. And so in so many ways, what happened in this court over the last, 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks, has been very much a show as well. Our government supported Juan Orlando Hernandez through so much and ignored very clear warning signs. And so I wanted to talk really briefly about the fact that there's still so much more to do in this campaign to hold the US and Canada accountable for their support for Juan Orlando Hernandez. So even though the trial is over, our campaign is not over. We will be putting out a communique very soon about the verdict in this trial. I'm going to take a little bit of a rest because it's been a very, very intense trial schedule, 2.5, 3 weeks. I've been in New York for a month, as a representative of the Putting the U.S. and Canada on Trial campaign, person. I've been here for a whole month. And so I'm going to take a couple of days of a break, but the campaign to hold the U.S. and Canada accountable will continue. We will be putting up actions. I believe we posted a Senate action for people to get involved. People can still sign put their names on an organizational sign-on. You can find this at hondurasnow.org. You can also go to the Honduras Solidarity Network's Twitter and find that action. We will also be continuing to insist in the Canadian Parliament as well as the U.S. Congress that there needs to be an investigation into the U.S. and Canadian role in backing the narco state and ignoring the warning signs that many organizations, congressional representatives put out over so many years. And we will also be putting out more information about the link between the U.S. and Canada to this trial. There's still so much to talk about, and I'll be putting out updates as we have. I think we've put out 11 updates since mid-January on the role of the U.S. and Canada. We just put out an update yesterday, update number 11, that looks at sort of what the DEA was saying about business. Any companies, U.S. and Canadian companies included, doing business with the narco state. And so please check that out at hondurasnow.org. We will continue. The campaign is ongoing. It's not an end for us. We will keep pushing for accountability in Canada, United States, and I encourage everyone to join us in that. But I think it's a moment to celebrate. Juan Orlando Hernandez is being held accountable for the narco trafficking he was involved in. But again, there's so much more work to do. So thank you so much for following this campaign. Stay tuned. It's not over. And we look forward to continuing engaging in the discussions about the role of the U.S. and Canada supporting the narco state over so many years. Thank you.